Welcome to Char, Tito Puente Jr. Thank you so much for joining Nelson Marquez and I.
Yes.
Nice to be here.
Nice
Nice to be here, guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man.
Mucho gusto.
Igualmente.
Eso.
Tito, I've been a major fan of your father's and a major fan of you for many years now. I remember as a kid, my titi bringing me to see La Gran Cambo in Los Angeles at the Palladium as a teenager, man. I think she had to watch me, so she was like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to take you." And we had danced salsa. We had a great time. And then several years later, actually, through a common friend, I got an opportunity to meet you and see you in concert in Las Vegas. I just felt like it was almost like a spiritual experience because it was almost like I felt like Tito was there, like with us. It was, you've heard of Beatlemania. Some people have called it Tito Puentes mania, but it was, for me, it was more because it was like there was, maybe it's in the genetics and just everything there was just the energy in the air. So how did that transpire for you? Share with us kind of like how that has come to be.
Thank you for having so great memories of me performing live. And of course, my late father is to, be commended for that, simply because he instilled in me the humbleness and the experience of performing live, just as an entertainer, all around entertainer. So and that's why I exude that from when I'm performing the music of a Rey Timbal, Tito Puente. And if any of you or anybody watching right now have met Tito Puente, they would know that my father's very humble, down-to-earth cat. Being, the Latin ambassador superstar around the world, he was very down-to-earth. So if you were to meet him in the streets of New York, he'd be like, "Hey, how you doing?" Very, very down-to-earth. So I get all that experience from him. But it was an amazing life, just being around him, an icon, a legend, child prodigy as well. Record holder for probably the most Latin albums ever created by one performer. I think he tops at 186 albums to his credit. That's far, far, far exceeds more than any other Latin artist, I think, alive today, simply because of his lifespan, and his career was over 50 years. But it was amazing. It was an amazing experience being around the king of Latin music and, just traveling around the planet with him. It's been 21 years this year since his passing in May 31st of 2000, but we remember him, and I continue pushing his music to the new stratospheres and the new generation. Because remember, a lot of kids today who were not even born then are now 20 years old today, never got to experience and see Tito Puente live. And if you got to experience and see Tito Puente or Celia Cruz en vivo and see them live, then you are very rare, one of those rare people that experience something, like you said, a religious experience. Experiencia religiosa.
My mom and dad had met Tito when they were starting early in their career. So there's been a long love within our family and within our circle of friends for Tito Puentes and for your music. I'd love to talk to you about, how have you been handling this whole COVID thing and dealing with that? And I saw that there was a very limited list of concerts. Has all your shows been canceled, or how's that been working for you?
I got some wood here, so I'm going to knock on it, that nothing that I had set up for the concert tour of last year in 2020 was canceled. Everything was postponed. So thank God for that, because I know a lot of musicians. Nelson can probably chime in on this too as well. As musicians, we like to, of course, perform, and that's where we get our bread and butter, basically. So it was very, very difficult during the last year for all musicians, including my orchestra and every musician I spoke with. And that includes the bigger musicians too, and the bigger celebrities and the bigger stars, and they all went through it the same way, because, as artists, we want to just share our artwork with everybody. And I built a career on that. Same with my father. I'm so glad my dad wasn't here to see this happen. But what would he have done? He probably would have pushed forward in recording, and that's exactly what I did. And I recorded a full-length LP during the pandemic. It was very, very tricky and hard to do, but I reached out to everybody because I knew that all the artists were sitting at home, and I said, let me go hit them up now so they're not on the road. And I caught each and every one of them. I got 10 beautiful acts and artists on that recorded with my father throughout the decades of his career to do a beautiful tribute record to Tito Puente. I haven't recorded in 11 years. So this was something that was coming to fruition prior to the pandemic. In 2019, we were discussing this and trying to get it all together. Then the pandemic hit, and I said, I can't stop doing this because I want to do what my father would have done. And he would have kept moving forward and pushing forward to get the completion, to see the completion of it, which he did with his last record, which was in 2000, which was called Obra Maestra with Eddie Palmieri. And my father knew he was very sick at the time, but he wanted to see the album to its completion, and he did. So I thought the same way. And I'm glad we finally got it out there and it's completed. And it was tricky to do. Remember, I had to fly everybody. Well, everybody had to do it remotely. But Tony Vega, God, man, he's an incredible singer, performer. Not only did he have he caught coronavirus, but he also had open heart surgery. And he was dying to sing on this tribute record so badly, no pun intended, that he flew down from Alabama and recorded at a studio here in South Florida. And, you know, he had the mask and everything, but he belted it out. I also went up to Orlando, worked with Meñique, you know, talented people that were much older, you know, they're elderly. I would even put them in that category. But I'm glad that I got to record them throughout the pandemic because they loved the fact that we were doing a tribute to Tito Puente. And I think that's what really mattered the most. And it kept the band working as well.
So that's fascinating. So what can you share with us about the process of how you conceptualize this album? What were the songs? Can you share with us a little bit about what songs you chose and how some of those arrangements came together?
Yeah, the name of the album is called The King and I. So the concept of the record was El Rey y Yo, and I wanted to do something that would be reflective of Tito Puente's career in different decades, starting from the 1950s all the way to his passing in 2000. So that's many, many decades of music. I wanted to take one artist that recorded specifically in a studio setting with Tito Puente. Meñique recorded back 50 years ago in 1971 with a tune called Niña y Señora. He's 87 years old now, but I got him on the album. So I took some Meñique for the 1970s. Then in the 80s, I got Jose Alberto Canario. 1990s, I got Domingo Quiñones, Tony Vega, who recorded 30 years ago on the 100th album of Tito Puente, Número 100, with a tune called Déjame Soñar. I remade a lot of the songs from those decades into this album. Notwithstanding, I also had to add female singers too as well. So I had Yolanda Duque, who recorded with Tito Puente and toured with the Tito Puente Orchestra for over 10 years in the 1990s. And then, of course, the queen of percussion, Sheila E. I had to get her on the record too. And she, of course, recorded with my father as well, along with her dad, Pete Escovedo, in a tribute with a tune called El Rey de Timbal. Each artist, the concept was to get them, and then not only did I record them in the studio or remotely, they also did some testimony in talking about how they recorded their session with Tito Puente, and then of course the session with Tito Puente Jr. So this is all being done also for a documentary series that's going to come out on life story of El Rey de Timbal later on this year, produced by Mr. Edward James Olmos. So I'm really excited about that, and I got everybody's video. The video, I compiled it with all the artists, and that'll be out, I think, right in the beginning of August, because they're still like editing it. And it's really exciting that I got this record to come out. And that's the concept of the record. I got to thank my wife, Rosalie. She came up with a lot of the ideas of the song titles. And remember, my father had over 10,000 compositions. So we have a vault up in New York that my mom controls, and I went over there and she said, go in there and cherry pick tunes. It was very difficult to pick songs that people can really relate to, especially mambo dancers, because there were so many. You know, the catalog is so large. So I can actually do volume 2 or 3 and 4 of this album. And I think I'm going to do that because the songs were so good. And I got so many fans requesting, hey, can you record this song and this song and that song? So I really want to please the fans and the dancers with the music of my father. Remember, there's so much music there. But with this record, The King and I, the concept of the record was being in the studio with the king of Latin music and myself, each artist giving their own testimony on how they relate to Tito Puente. Really cool concept, and I'm glad it's out.
You as his son, but also as an artist, like, can you share a little bit about like your growth from, being a child and a kid, experiencing, your father as a dad, but also as an icon, and then like, what was your path in terms of relating to your dad? So what were some of the different phases that you went through childhood, teenage, and becoming a man, and then becoming a father? And how did those different stages of your life relate to your relationship with your father?
Well, I guess now would be the time to say that I'm going to do a book on all that. And I got some really crazy history just traveling around the planet with, an icon like Tito Puente was just, I can write just a book on that alone. But with my path, I originally liked, when I was growing up, I'll start from high school. When I was growing up, I liked rock music. I started off playing drums. That's my first love as a drummer. Phil Collins, Chester Thompson, Neil Peart, all the greats, the great rock drummers. So I was into that bag. My father didn't really care for rock drumming. He was into more jazz, Gene Krupa, all those great drummers, from yesteryear. So he was into that bag, but I was into heavy metal and just straight rock music. Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slayer. Those were my favorite bands. They still are today. And then I traveled with Tito Puente. What happened was that my father did 300 shows a year. And during the summertime, during high school, my mother said, "You're not spending enough time with your father," because he was never really there that much. And I said, the best way we could do it is during the summertime, go on the road with him. And that was the most incredible experience that I can, explain to you guys. Again, I put the definitive version in the book, but just experiencing on the road with a legend like that and understanding that different cultures all have one thing in common, and that's music. And when I would travel to the Far East and to the Orient, especially in the Orient, in Indonesia and in China and Japan, just those countries, they didn't even know to understand the language, but they understood the language of the conga, the timbal, the bongo of Tito Puente. And that took me into the 3-2 clave and learning about Latin music and my first love of it. And that's when I started playing timbal, conga, bongo, and those instruments from the derivative of the drums. I still love rock music, but at that point I started getting into more Latin dance and Latin house music. And then, of course, I had my own career doing dance music and freestyle and house. And I did 10 years of that, dancing around on stage, traveling the world with my dancers and my crew and all that. But it all comes back to the roots of it all, which is Tito Puente music, in which I play now. Just the ups and downs of being in the music industry. Nelson can probably, understand this very well, that it varies. One thing's for sure is that music brings everybody together. It brings nations and cultures and creeds and colors, everybody together. And I see that through my audiences every time I travel around the planet. Everybody comes to see the music and hear the music of Herrera Timbal. As if you think about it, the music that I am playing is over almost 60, 70 years old. He was creating these songs back in 1949. So it still resonates with younger fans, and it's great to just keep that in perpetuity. Keep it going. Throughout my kids too. Hopefully my kids will take after me, my little son and my daughter, and they're musicians in their own right, and hopefully they'll keep the tradition alive.
When you were home with your father, did you pick up on his work ethic, his practice routines, and how do they affect your practice today, the way you keep your chops up when you're going to go out on the road?
Every part of what you just said is factual. I got all my discipline from Tito Puente. He was I would go as far as saying militant with his orchestra. He made sure that these guys knew that he got the best professional readers, and professional musicians in the Tito Puente orchestra throughout his entire career. He was very, very, just very disciplined in his musicianship. And he wanted to make sure that the band was tight. And of course, he had the master congueros with him: Giovanni Hidalgo, Patato Valdez, Mongo Santa Maria, Willie Bobo. These are Ray Barretto. These are master percussion players.
Absolutely.
And my father taught me this, Nelson. He said, surround yourself with creative people, thus you will be creative. So my dad was around creative guys like that were master musicians. He had to keep up with them. Even though he was the eldersman, but he had to keep up with them, because these guys didn't F around. They came in there and they played their asses off, and Dad had to keep up with them, But then in return too, there are percussion players that needed to keep up with Tito Puente as well, especially the musicians that he worked with. You mentioned something about being at home. Yes, I did get the work ethic from him, but I could tell you one thing. As a child, all of us can probably vouch for this. Your parents tell you not to do something. What do? You do it. So there were a lot of drums in my garage. So my dad would say, this is when I was 8 or 9 years old, no toca mi timbales, no touch my drums, don't touch my things, nothing. What do I do as a kid? Go in the drum. I start banging on the drums. And that's where I got the incentive to play music. But remember, as an 80s kid Growing up in the 80s, I was into Michael Jackson, Phil Collins, Def Leppard, you know, all the Aerosmith, you know, all the pop music at that time. I think the only Latin thing that was popular at that era was probably Gloria Estefan, Miami Sound Machine, you know, that style of music, which I considered to be Latin music. As an American, you know, American-born Puerto Rican, I felt that was really the Latin, you know, tinge at that time. Julio Iglesias, that was really our go-to, you know, for Latin music at that era. But as we evolved and as we moved forward, we saw the Latin explosion. Martin, the Menudo, all that came into play, and it was different genres coming into effect. But Tito Puente was always on the straight of what his, you know, vision was with Celia Cruz, which was bringing, you know, mambo, guanguanco, rumba, cha-cha-cha, and, you know, so montuno to everybody. He was the leader. He was the leader in that aspect. But his work ethic definitely was there, and Celia's was as well. Both of them. That's why they were considered the king and queen, those icons, because their work ethic and their humbleness to the world really shined. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for that.
You know, within the music history, there's different artists have handled the ownership and being able to keep the copyrights of their music in different ways. I mean, there's been some fantastic examples. For example, like Ray Charles really, in a way, pioneered keeping the ownership of his masters, or at least some ownership, at least a percentage of ownership, and partnering with the different labels so that they were partners. It wasn't just the record companies owning everything. Frank Sinatra was another pioneer in the music industry in that way. And you had mentioned your father, you know, sharing with you about the different nuances of the music business. You know, how did your father throughout the Fontana All-Stars onward, like, handle, you know, these different issues with rights and being able to control his music? And he did so many albums, like you said. Was there like a kind of learning curve for him in the business? And was he able to empower you as well to carry on a tradition of ownership and freedom?
Back then, you know, just like every other artist, and we hear it all the time, that, you know, they were all swindled and duped, and they were all shylarks, and, you know, nobody got their royalties and all that. And that did happen. And that's, I think, every single artist across the board, from the beginning of sound recording. We can go back to when the airwaves started. You can go back to all the way back to them. Everybody's been ripped off, and it's just like the norm for most artists. You know, they didn't understand it. Most artists are artists. That's what they are. They want to share their artwork, and they're too busy trying to create more art and to entertain people than to think about, well, where are my royalties going, and where the master recordings or anything like that. My father did 2 to 3 albums a year. That's why he has over 186. So when he was recording with RCA Victor, he was doing 2 to 3 a year. So the way it worked was that he would record, they would give him a check, he would record the album, they put it out. He was too busy touring and on to the next album to think about that last one. But of course they would be selling. And so that's why I would say my father really didn't stay on top of it too much, you know, as far as where his royalties and things of that nature are going. However, as he got older, and of course, his trusty old son and our family, we told them, you know, as laws change and the companies change too, the conglomerates and everybody's getting bought out, you have to follow where your music is going. And we did that. We did that about 20 years ago before his passing. And that's why my father ended up being one of those artists that got his residuals and collects his residuals on time and orderly fashion. And we monitor all that. And, you know, things have changed. Oh, now it's all streaming services now and doing it. We stay on top of that as well. But Tito Puente was just a magical person as far as his performing live. My dad did so many performances live. You know, 300 shows a year is a lot of work. And that's going for like 20 years straight. And prior to that, you know, it was a lot of recording. But it's very important that we follow the master tapes and all that. And I know that we're going to get all ours back from yesteryear, from the 1950s and 60s. Those are the master recordings that us as the family would like to get retracted back to us, and we're looking for that. All the rest of them, a lot of people still have them, and those are really fond recordings. You mentioned one earlier, Numero 100 was a fantastic album. I did a recording on my new album of two of those songs. One was being the S.T.E.A.M.S, the other one was a tune by the great Ismael Miranda, who right now is very, very sick in Puerto Rico. Well, we wish him well recovery. But I got Yolanda Duca to do a tune called El Bribón del Aguacero. Fantastic tune. You know, those songs, I always make sure that the writers and the composers of those tunes get their credit, because my father didn't get a lot of credit when he was going through it. So I want to make sure that in the future, those recording artists get their due respect and their due royalties. Tito Puente was slick, though. My father recorded a lot of tunes for a guy named Morris Levy. He owned a catalog. It was a the name of it, Chesky Records, or some other. There was another record company back in the day, but so he wasn't getting a lot of royalties. So what he would do is he would re-record the songs and with another company and change the title, and that way you got the royalties for that song.
Right.
So my father was slick. You know, he did
Absolutely.
that a lot. If you listen to a lot of Tito Puente records, you'd be like, hey, that song sounds familiar. Like, that song was Hong Kong Mambo in 1957, but in this one it's called Hong Kong Watusi. He changed the name of the title, but it was still the same song. And that's how Puente got around that whole, these guys are trying to rip him off. He said, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, I'm going to do the song over and put it on another album. And that's what he would do.
Is there someone that you would like to share about in terms of, I mean, certainly your father was a tremendous influence, but were there other salseros and other musicians and masters that you worked with that also influenced you as an artist?
You know, there's so many great artists that I look up to, but notwithstanding that, I also were around them all my life. So every one of them worked with my father, especially the ones that are on my latest album, The King and I. You know, I look up to each and every one of those artists as an uncle or an aunt, or just somebody that I really desired to be like, or to just explore their vision and what they see in their, you know, in their performances. But again, you know, I always go with the rock music. So, you know, I always when I looked in the mirror when I was a kid, I was thinking about Bon Jovi. I was thinking about, you know, about Aerosmith, about Steven Tyler and being a rock star. But I never thought that I would be playing Tito Puente music at the age of 50. But I have so many great influences in my life and in my career, but they're just not the genre of music that I play. Dance music, freestyle, I love all that music. I love heavy metal and rock, and I have so many different influences, music and icons that I adore and I look up to. The Tony Bennett's, the Duke Ellingtons, the Count Basie's, those great icons like that are just magical, and they're just monstrous as far as in their respective genres. But to me, I don't feel that Puente music or anything that I'm doing now can resonate more, but just with the fans. And I see that when I have actors and actresses and people, you know, inboxing me, and, you know, Charlie Sheen, hey man, I'm a fan of Tito Puente. Okay, you know, just celebrities, and you know, it's just funny, you know, Fat Joe and rappers. Hey man, Tito, what's up? You know, they all inbox me and they all give me kudos and respect, you know, for what I'm doing and promoting Tito Puente music. But it's funny seeing that and hearing how Tito Puente's, you know, name is so synonymous with just being an American Latin iconic musician. Absolutely. And it's great to see that people are still respecting that, and you know. Yes. I love that, just that in general.
That's beautiful.
One of the focuses of Char is an idea that's basically, like, I've noticed we don't always have the best examples of Latinos in the media. So part of the idea of our show Char is to talk to leaders in the Latino community. And you're definitely a leader in our community. And I wanted to talk to you about leadership. And, you know, like you mentioned about, you know, in putting an album together, I mean, that's taking on a leadership position, and the organizing, the bringing people together, you know, from a leadership point of view, like, what's that been like for you? And how do you see your role as a leader within the community, within your band, and within your business?
So I know my impact, and I know where my voice is being heard, and I know I'm being seen in my social media pages. And so I know take pride in everything that I post or anything that I'm going to say. And I think that comes from my father too, because everything that he did and he said, he meant, and he did it with pride. And I think that's really important being in this world today. Music is bringing people together. I take pride in being Hispanic. I take pride in being Puerto Rican, Puerto Riqueño. I take pride in the music that I present. I think it's multicultural music, and what we bring to the table as Latinos, as just men of being Hispanic, of race, of origin. I think we have very eloquent, intelligent way of speaking. I think we can connect with people around the world. I connect with all ages, creeds, colors, people of all races. Jamaican, Haitian, French, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, every culture, race comes to my concerts, and I connect with them. So every thought that I might have, and I know that I'm presenting, it's well thought out, it's thought-provoking, and I make sure that I'm going to say something that's going to be influential to the young youth of today. For instance, here's a perfect example. Our Cuban brothers and sisters on the island over there, it's time for change. I believe that there is too. I say that with pride and conviction and passion. It's time for change. The old is old, guys. We're getting older. We're not getting younger. And the old has to be pushed out. Time for new legislation, new faces, new thought processes, new everything. Yes. And I think Cuba is way overdue for a new government there. I think they need new guidelines for how the people should be treated. And I think it's time for music to be a part of that culture, since they have given us everything that we have as far as music is concerned. Afro-Cuban music is what salsa is. And it's time now for us as just Latinos and Latin musicians to give back to that beautiful country. And I want to go there and perform and do a bunch of concerts for free and make sure that these people know that we respect their culture and everything that they've given us. So those things are the things that I think about as, and like you said before, what Char means. I think as a leader, I feel that those things are thought-provoking, and I want everybody to understand that being a leader in my community, or what I do in Latin musicianship, that we have a responsibility. And Char, you guys are important in that. You're giving a platform for someone like me to tell everybody about these important issues that we have as Latino men, around the world. So thanks.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that, brother. Beautifully said, and I agree with you 1000%.
Gracias,
hermano.
Seguro que sí.
Yeah. That was beautiful, Tito. Thank you for that. It's so gorgeous. One question I wanted to, is there anything that you would recommend to a beginning musician?
Yes, I get that question a lot too. The SoundCloud platform works fantastic. I'm hearing a lot of great salsa singers and performers on there. The YouTube, of course, I'm seeing a lot of great performers from around the world performing on these things. Again, surround yourself with creative people, thus you will be creative. I always take that into mind with what my father taught me.
Great
and being
advice.
Around musicians, and Nelson, you can vouch for this. Being around musicians is a camaraderie. Me and Nelson could probably sit all night long just sitting talking about music. It's just something about musicianship, and that we just have a camaraderie. I can sit with a piano player, a sax player, and just talk about music all night long. I love doing that. Yeah. And to me, that's my favorite part about being a musician and being around musicians. So if you are an upcoming musician, take your craft and surround yourself with other creative people and other creative musicians. I promise you, you're going to bounce ideas off each other, just like Char and Tito Puente did. And look at that, they made a grand hit.
So chills, man. Chills.
Yeah, man, it's so cool to be around musicians, and I'm glad that now we can get out there. Trust me, I it's funny because in 2019 when I was touring a lot, I didn't want to be around my musicians. I was done with them. I was like, okay, after the show, I didn't want to see them. Now we go to the hotel. Now, after the show, we're like high five, we're chatting, we're talking all night now, and it's great, and the camaraderie of being around other creative people is what my advice to any young musician that's watching right now, whether you play saxophone, woodwind, percussion, a violin, string instrument, anything. Surround yourself with other people that play that same instrument. You're going to get ideas off each other. You guys are going to have. That's how I created a band It's how you create all orchestras,
Yes.
hanging around other musicians. So do yourself a favor and surround yourself with other creative people like yourself.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Awesome. Tito, thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful interview, and thank you for your generosity and just the beautiful sharing that we shared today. So thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch and look forward to seeing you in person and in concert. And we'll also be sharing your links with our audience. And thank you so much. And anytime you have anything to share with us.
Thank you so much, Rami and Nelson, man. Good to see you, my brother. I hope to get out to the West Coast and hang out with you guys. And again, it's such a pleasure. If you guys are interested in the docu-series, you could check out this website. It's called TitoPuenteProject.com. And really, hopefully, that all the fans will enjoy the docu-series on the life and legacy of Tito Puente. And, of course, follow me on all my social media. And you guys can pick up the brand new record called The King and I, out on all digital platforms now. So look out for that. And thank you. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes. Es un honor para mí. Yo soy el hijo del rey de timbal, Tito Puente, de participar en su programa. Thank you guys once again, man. Nice to see y'all.
Appreciate you,
Thank you for
Tito.
your openness, your honesty, and your hustle. I consider you an excellent ambassador for Música Latina around the world. So it was great meeting you, great talking with you, and I look forward to doing it again at another time in person.
Please, Nelson, stay in touch, man, and inbox me those things on IG. I'd love to be a part of that.
Absolutely,
Thanks,
I will.
All right.
Gracias, hermanos.
Thank you so much, Tito. Appreciate you.
Have a fantastic weekend, and do it with Tito Puente music. Vaya.
Vaya. Dale.
Take care. Thank you so much. All right.